Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's edition of HR Mentorship Learning Series. Today, I'll be teaching on the subject Lessons from HR Scandals, what every HR professional and leader must know. Ladies and gentlemen, I was preparing for a particular session when this particular topic came to my mind. To a large extent, people generally like gist. And you will recall that we've had a few scandals in the last few years. There was one very popular scandal, in quotes, this year that involved a senior woman who was in HR and a senior man who was, I think, the CEO. If you remember the particular scandal or scenario I'm talking about right now, you can drop whatever details you know about it in the chat box. And somehow people like stories, but people also particularly like, should I say, romance-related stories. Exactly. But beyond the razzmatazz, beyond the gist, the gossip, the dissecting of who was right, wrong, the moralities, and the ethics, there are also different lessons that one can learn and one must learn. Also, generally speaking, sometimes we talk about experience being the best teacher. While I agree that experience is the best teacher, the experience does not have to be your own. In other words, it does not mean you personally have to go through that pain or that process in every context. So if something happens to somebody or to an organization and you do a deep dive, you interrogate the scenarios, the actions and inactions, and then you internalize it, then that becomes your experience, such that in future, either near future, medium term, or long term, something similar wants to rear its head, because in quote, it had happened to you before. When I say happened to you, not necessarily because it happened to you personally, but it happened in a space you are aware of, but you internalized it, you'll be able to spot it very early. Let me give you one non-HR example. I remember growing up and I used to hear my father, for example, mention how somebody was on a high speed and then there is a tire burst and then they match the brake suddenly and then the vehicle somersaults. So I had that story multiple times from my father, my uncles, and so on and so forth. Fast forward many years later, I will never forget this day in my life. I was traveling with my cousins from ABU Zaria to Kaduna. I was driving a Honda Accord. In the north, people loved Hondas a lot. Roughly then, this way back, please, so nobody should report me to road safety. This way back, I was comfortably around 130, 140 kilometers per hour. And then suddenly, the front tire burst. Suddenly. Guess what came to my mind? Don't press the brake. Now, this is not anybody talking to me. And I just held on to the steering wheel. I didn't match the brake. Of course, I stopped accelerating almost instantaneously. And after a few kilometers, the car increasingly began to decelerate, and then it came to a halt. Thankfully, somehow, the cars that were either ahead of us or behind us, nobody hit us. I didn't hit anybody. Then I came out of the car. All my three cousins in the vehicle, they came out and they were hugging me one after the other. They said, "You are the best driver we've ever met." That how on earth I didn't match the brake, they can't explain it. Guess what? Looking back now, the only reason I didn't match that brake, of course, the grace of God, and we give them all the praise. But it looked like I had matched the brake like 20 times in the past, when I had always had a story or a scenario where a driver was on high speed, there was a tire puncture, and they matched the brake. I don't know if you understand. So it looked like I had died multiple times, and that day was not the first time. Now, one of the things that we've seen when we talk about scandals in HR or leadership is that when trust fails, policies are what? Powerless. When trust fails, policies are powerless. You know, in HR, we sometimes pride ourselves in having documentation, in having, what do you call it, standard operating procedures, processes, and so on and so forth. But there is so much that you can do if trust, for example, no longer exists. If enough employees in your organization decide to shortchange the system, they can cooperate and collaborate and sabotage, no matter the maker checker systems you put in place. So at some point, you still need people of goodwill, of conscience. So just in case there's anybody who is listening to me by chance for the first time ever, this is just my profile. I've been doing this for about 24 years, if not more. And I love doing this. Okay, I love doing this. You can check out my sessions on YouTube. Now, why does this topic matter now? Even though I've begun to allude to the reasons even before now from a personal perspective. According to the Harvard Business Review, corporate misconduct reportedly went up 40% since 2022. So increasingly, we are hearing more and more about corporate misconduct. And let me quickly throw this here. And you can respond in the chat box, if you don't mind. So would we say, this data says that what? Corporate misconduct report up 40%. Not what was up, the report. That does not necessarily mean that corporate misconduct actually increased. Is somebody with me? It's one thing for something to increase, it's another thing for reporting to increase. Maybe 10, 20, 30 years ago, there are certain things, behaviors you hear at the workplace, maybe harassment, misconduct, and so on and so forth. Then, because there was no social media, except that thing is very massive, it will not spread nationwide or worldwide quickly. But today, because of social media, something can happen, and in 1 hour, not only will it have gone viral nationally, it will have gone viral globally. So that tells us why we should pay more attention even today. Because even if the victim, doesn't go to court, there is also the social court, social media. Again, furthermore, regulators now enforce duty to prevent, not just duty to respond. I hope you understand that there's a difference between preventing an harassment and assault from happening to your staff or employee, male or female, and then after it has happened, how did you treat the incidents, or how did you treat the complaint? So regulators largely now also are, putting their foot down, that there's this duty to prevent, not just duty to respond. HR scandals sometimes destroys even faster than financial losses. Of course, a company can fold up, shut down, they can enter liquidation if they have financial issues. But sometimes a scandal can even hurt faster, because you see, will-be investors will decline, existing investors may divest or pull out. And that's why sometimes, as you saw in the case of that man and woman, most recently, you saw how quickly the MD or the CEO had to resign. Why? It is to prevent backlash from investors. HR must evolve from what? Policy custodian to culture risk manager. Policy custodian now means, our employee handbook, the labor laws, the code of ethics. And culture, generally we say is the way of life. So how do we ensure that our behavior, both on and off the job, our relationship between colleagues, subordinates, senior people, peers, and so on and so forth. So generally, we'll look at some global trends in HR scandals. We'll look at anatomy of HR failures. We look at a few case highlights and then lessons. And then we look at the ethical HR blueprints. We'll look at some cases, we'll discuss it together, some hypothetical cases, we rub minds. Please stay tuned and stay ready to unmute or raise your hands, recognize and share. We'll also see how we can build culture of trust. Now, look at this table. These are examples, ladies and gentlemen, of some misconducts. Okay, we had the McDonald's UK issue. It was driven by the Me Too and the misconduct exposure. And in this context, for example, HR was bypassed by employees, and so on and so forth. Now, let me stop sharing and let me pick one or two stories. Let me pick one or two stories so that I read them basically, very quickly. Okay, so let's look at the McDonald's story, for example. So please pay attention, ladies and gentlemen. McDonald's UK faced a major scandal after widespread allegation of sexual harassment, bullying, and racism in restaurants led to a formal investigation and a legally binding agreement with the UK's equality regulator. The case has been used to illustrate employers' new proactive duty to prevent harassment in UK Worker Protection Act. That's one example. Let me use another example very quickly. So there's this case of Rio Tinto, which focused around the bullying and cultural retaliation. In 2022, a review exposed serious issues with sexual harassment, bullying, and racism. Rio Tinto pledged major cultural reforms in the organization. Yet, a follow-up report showed increases in sexual assault reports and bullying complaints, particularly targeting women, despite some progress elsewhere. That's the second example. Let me use another example here that I saw with respect to Nine Entertainment and Harrods. Okay, and the people in this instance complained that we couldn't go to HR. An independent review of Australian media group Nine found a culture of what? Bullying and sexual harassment, concluding behavior not acceptable in any workplace. Okay, for example, the UK luxury retailer Harrods hit headlines when victims of sexual harassment said they couldn't go to the HR. In other words, they couldn't come to us. Why? They cited fear, power imbalance, and lack of what? Trust in internal processes. Okay, so you see different scenarios and different examples. Another one that we know, the tech company CEO and the chief people officer, they were spotted in a public stadium in what we now call the Kiska incident. And this raised conflict of interest issues and also internal trust issues. We can go on and on and on and on and on. Okay, but having highlighted some of these issues, examples, now let's go back to the slides, okay, and then take them one after the other. Now, what are some of the common threads across some of these scandals? Of course, it will also include scandals in Nigeria that maybe somehow were swept under the carpet or didn't make it to the front headlines. Okay. You will see that there is sometimes a weak trust in HR. We can't report to them. You also see some form of what we call power asymmetry. And by power asymmetry, we mean a situation where senior leaders protected from or insulated from prosecution. Because some of the culprits, some of the people perpetuating the injustice or the discrimination or the assault or the harassment were senior, there is the tendency for people, some of the stakeholders, to want to protect them. Why? It will look like if we expose this situation, we are exposing our organization. Okay. Again, you see a lot of focus on compliance after the damage has been done. In other words, what did we do prior to this issue or incident happening? Sometimes you also see a situation or scenario where we don't have data to detect toxic culture. And we'll see some of these things as we proceed. Last but not the least, in the anatomy of HR scandals, you will also see diversity without psychological safety. Diversity means, you have a blend of, for example, culture, race, gender, and so on and so forth. But that on its own is not sufficient. Psychological safety means people can express their thoughts, their opinion, their concerns without fear of retribution, without fear of maybe they will be punished in the future as a result of what they have said or as a result of them expressing their view. Now, why is this important? Okay, why do we need to prevent scandals, so to speak, in the first place? Now, according to SHRIM 2024, the average settlement for workplace misconduct was $310,000 US. That's a lot of money. Don't even bother to convert it to Naira. Again, very importantly, when these issues happen, it leads to a breach of trust in the system, in the organization. And almost immediately, what you experience is a higher attrition rate. A lot of people will feel uncomfortable because it has happened. They may begin to wonder how many really happened that were not reported. Of course, it also leads to reputational damage. People begin to, if people get a job offer in your organization or even see a vacancy from your organization, they will think twice. Okay. There's one organization, for example, in Lagos, Nigeria. The kind of scandal that happened to them was they're a construction company. It was a building collapse. Are you still there? Guess what? They are still in operation today, but they had to go and change their name. The reputational damage the building collapse did to them was so severe that the only way for them to continue operation, even though they are trying to clean up the mess, the pain, and everything associated with the building collapse with the government, they had to start all over again with a different name. That's how huge a reputational damage can be. So every HR scandal, somehow, is an unpaid bill from what? A cultural problem. I remember, this is way back, a colleague of mine, who is also a member of this group, our community, had told me, she's my friend, we still spoke yesterday, told me how she was in a lift with a senior official, and the senior official grabbed her boobs in the lift. And then he quickly left her. Note, in this lift, there's no CCTV in the lift. And it just so happened that, there were only the two people in the lift at that time. Guess what? For the rest of her work in that particular organization, anytime she entered the lift and saw that man, and she wanted to enter, what will she do? She won't enter. If she was in the lift and the man enters, no matter the floor, she will immediately come out. Can I shock you? This lady was in HR. Who will she report to? Herself? Things like this happen. But who do people report? So, you can see case one, which I highlighted, McDonald's UK 2023 or thereabout, widespread harassment, fear of reporting. Guess what? The employee said we had a policy, but we had no protection. I need us to reflect on this. So the mere presence of a policy does not necessarily equate protection. I'm sure the average person in Nigeria can relate to this. We almost have a policy for almost anything from a government perspective. But does that translate to a benefit in reality? Of course, if you don't have a policy, then your journey is even far. You first of all need to have a policy. But don't say, oh, we have a sexual harassment policy and it ends there. Or we have a anti-bullying policy and then it ends there. No, that's just the starting point. Okay. Now, some of the things we need to do, we need to audit our frontline culture. And we also need to do more supervisory training. You know, for example, it's one thing to tell your leadership and your management or your frontline employees to say, oh, in this organization, company KKK, we don't tolerate bullying. Question, what is bullying? What are the behaviors, mannerisms, actions, inactions that may be equal or tantamount to bullying? Let me ask, if you are working with somebody in an organization, do you know that it could be a form of bullying if consistently, continuously, you intentionally ignore to respond to maybe a particular staff's email? Could that be bullying? Some people do that. Some people do that. Thank you, everyone, for contributing in the comment section. I see you. I see your hand. Thank you. So bullying is not, I'm sure, especially in individual relationships or family relationships, you've had what they call cold treatment. Who knows what cold treatment is? Do you know that there are people at the workplace that also do cold treatment? Especially maybe if they are senior to you. Now, I just want to ask, I'm curious, how do you report cold treatment to HR or to the board? How do you report that maybe this person, if I greet him, he doesn't answer? If I try to talk to him, he doesn't answer. Meanwhile, some of the people who do this cold treatment thing, when you greet them in the presence of other people, they will answer and they will answer very warmly. So that when you tell other people that this man or this woman does this to you, they will say, no, this is a lie. So you see, we need to do a lot more. We need to do a lot more so that prevention can be done and so that policy in itself can translate to protection to a large extent. That is it, my brother. What if it is the head of HR who does the cold treatment? We've seen it. We've seen it over and over again. Okay? So the other scenario, Rio Tinto, which I also had discussed briefly, reform plans failed after initial scandal. So there was, in quotes, an initial scandal. You know how organizations are jolted, everybody sit up, maybe they even sack some people, they do the organization. But after a while, they came to do an audit. But in that particular system, most of the middle managers were unchanged. They didn't change their orientation. They didn't change their behavior. They didn't change their mindset. What happened? The values in that particular organization collapsed. So a cultural reform sometimes is important, but is a difficult task. It requires a lot of change management effort. And a cultural reform may not be a one-time initiative. It may be over 1-2 years. And then you now begin to measure leadership behavior. In the third case, Arrows and Deny Entertainment, the staff, the employees said they couldn't trust HR. In fact, they alluded to the fact that HR is management's defense unit. Can you imagine? We, HR, the people who are supposed to be able to escalate issues to us, felt that it's like reporting management to management. Either we could not do anything, toothless bulldog, or we will just ignore it, we'll gloss over it. So part of our KPIs is what? Is trust. It's trust. Not just us processing forms, processing leave, processing reimbursements, those kind of things. Can we be trusted? Trusted to hear the information and trusted to act. Can you imagine? Somebody on this call just dropped it that my MD is currently giving me co-treatment. So sorry to hear that. Somebody also dropped a message here that the head of department, please pay attention to this, blocked his team member on WhatsApp, and he got to me. I went straight to his office and told him to unblock the staff because she was unable to reach him on official matters, only to discover that the lady refused his advancement. So because the lady refused a personal unofficial request, you now blocked the person from accessing official guidance support. Can be frustrating. Can be really, really, really frustrating. All right. So it's important that we have systems and structures that are also independent, so that senior leaders are not overtly protected and shielded, so that investigations cannot be manhandled. I used to work in a place where, you know, when there is any major disciplinary proceedings or process, you know, of course, you have to let the CEO know. But guess what? HR was so independent that the CEO could not determine, interfere, or influence who the panel members will be. In that particular organization, that was the level of autonomy and independence given to HR. Do you know why? Sometimes the case may involve an ally, a close friend of the CEO. And people sometimes know that. How do you compromise investigation sometimes? When you compromise the setup, the composition or constitution of the investigation panel. You put people that you know that are either sympathetic to the culprit rather than people who are sympathetic to professionalism. So we must find a way to ensure that HR retains some structural independence and also have some direct access either to the CEO or even to the board, depending on the situation at hand. Now, these are like the 4 cases, you know, I've looked at Albert very briefly. Look at the team. McDonald's UK, the team here is frontline harassment. Breakdown for HR here, weak supervision and fear of reporting. So we understand the frontline harassment in McDonald's went on for too long than it should have been. Why? Because people were not reporting. And because people were not reporting, the perpetrators became even more emboldened and they were doing it more and more. So that you have a system, a mechanism in your organization, in the workplace, that people can report, can whistleblow, is sometimes even a form of deterrent. Just the possibility that people can report, that there is a mechanism for people to report. Now, what are the core lessons here in the case of McDonald's UK? You know, do you have an audit culture? Can you audit your culture, not just your policy? Yeah, if you check for policy, it will show that it's there. Anti-bullying, tick. Anti-victimization, tick. Anti-racism, tick. anti-assault, tick. That you tick the policy doesn't mean the culture ticks. There are certain cultural behaviors that aid and abet any of these undesirable behaviors. Okay? What happened in Rio Tinto? The theme for that is culture fatigue. There was a reform, but there was no accountability in the reform process. And then the core lesson is, how do you sustain change multi-year, maybe across the year or across years? Harrods was seen as a management defense unit. The core theme here is the credibility of HR. And let me quickly drop this here. You know, I was talking to some HR colleagues just this Saturday, and we were talking about employee survey. And I told them that my personal preference when I do employee survey is that I'll put an option where employees can choose to put their name, and the option that they can also choose not to put their name. Now, if we have 100 employees in an organization, please stay with me, and of the 100 employees, only 50 filled the survey and 50 did not fill the survey, please, the 50 that did not fill a survey, is that not already a feedback? Not filling the survey is a feedback. What the feedback is, well, we may need to decipher. But not filling is what? A feedback. Now, if 50 fill, and I'm using 100 for mathematical arithmetic convenience, are you with me? If 50 fill, and of the 50, only 5 put their name, the other 45 did not put their name, is that not a feedback? That you are only comfortable telling us what you think when you don't put your name is also a feedback. You know, if you ask your employees and say, ask a question like, please, in company KKK, do you agree that you have psychological safety? And you now put yes or no. Why do you think most employees will write? Because you have asked a direct and explicit question, most likely they'll just be putting yes. But I don't need to ask if we have psychological safety or not. The moment I put a survey where it was optional to put your name versus not put your name, and a significant majority decided not to put their name, that's a feedback that there is no psychological safety. Because if there is psychological safety, why will people be afraid to put their name when providing a feedback? Sometimes power imbalance. Maybe senior leaders will be shielded, and you need to what? Ensure the independence of HR. Thank you so much, Chidi. You highly appreciate this psychological concept of feedback mechanism. Exactly. You know, sometimes we do survey. How you do it matters. Okay, how we do it matters. So I would like us to discuss. So at this intersection, because I said today, as much as possible, I would like to take comments and feedback from the floor. So this is the first point I need us to discuss. So you work in a place and a senior manager is dating his direct report. What would you do? Anyone, please. All you need to do is just raise your hand and I will unmute you. So while we are still thinking about the first question, I will also show the second question. So if you want, you can respond to any of the questions. So in your workplace today, of course, please don't mention the name of your organization, or please don't mention any organization, please. So the second question to discuss here, you get complaints appear on social media, maybe about one of your employees. Okay, so question, who will investigate? Or what would you do? Okay, I'm still waiting for us to raise our hands so that I can unmute us and we can speak. Third point to discuss here. So you do an engagement survey and you want to measure the trust the employees have in HR, your department. And the feedback you get is that only 20% of your employees trust HR. What metric are you going to try and measure next? Or what are you going to do next? So these are the 3 questions. You can respond to any or every of the questions. All right, please help my career by contributing. Naza, you have the floor.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Doc.
Good evening, my sister.
I just want to answer maybe like a one sentence answer to question 1.
Okay.
Senior manager getting direct report. First step. I think the first step is to check what the policy says. There are organizations that have nothing against people dating in the workplace. I mean, I've worked in places where the head of a department and another head of department are husband and wife. They are couples, and then there's another set of couples in the school, in the organization as well. In the organization as well, and they actually met in the school, right? They met. Oh my God, I said school. They met in the school, and they eventually got married. So I think first of all is to check what is in the policy. Is the organization's policy against dating or not? I think that would be the very first step. I'm
Okay.
open to be corrected, please.
Okay. Okay, very, very good one. But still stay with me, Naza. You know, when Mr. A and Madam B begin to date, and then it ends in marriage, you know, like we say, and happily ever after. What of if 2 years down the line, 1 year down the line, there is a breakdown in the relationship, then it turns to victimization and abuse? So what would you also do first? Next?
What to do next when it becomes victimization and abuse?
It started well, oh. It was lovey. They were watching
Yeah.
movie, popcorn, you know, chilling, those kind of things.
And they did not get married, or they got married?
They didn't get married.
Don't
In
get
fact, the
married.
man is no longer interested. The man is now using his office to say,
Okay. I don't let another person answer this one.
on a lighter note, Naza, somebody dropped a comment for you. The person said, you are still checking the policy.
Now we still check the policy.
That's on the lighter note anyway. Okay, Chiri, please, let's hear your contribution.
Another person to answer.
Thank you for belling the cat. Thank you, Naza. Chiri, please.
Okay, good evening, Doc.
Good evening.
I think my contribution first, she said she would check the policy, something that have happened where I worked. A direct report, a senior manager dictating a direct report. At a point, when he's done with this, he will switch over to the next person. So something happened.
Rotational dating.
Yes. At a point, it became a problem. The ladies are now fighting themselves. So something happened. He now sent me a mail that he wants this person to be removed, that she's this, she's that. Not knowing that I've already got to the background. I knew when he was dating the girl. I knew when he changed. Each time they change, so I'm the HR, I observe them. I understand what they do. So at that point in time, when he said this person is this, is that, I said, if there is an issue between this person and you, do it officially, issue a query with an investigation. Don't use me to settle. So let there be a query. Let's follow it the way it should be. Let's investigate it. And if she's culpable, we'll pull her. But telling me she's this, she's that, without any verifiable proof or facts, because I already knew, maybe he didn't know I had the background that they were dating at the point they stopped. So at that point, you have to be official, in as much as the dating was not like he forced any of them to date him. he approached them, they are adults, and they agreed to date him, knowing that he's already a married man. So whatever he wants to change. So to me, I don't think I would want to victimize anyone, but the truth is that I must follow the right policy, the right disciplinary process. Let an investigation be done, and let's sit for a panel. If the person is culpable, then we'll take the necessary action. But I would not, because it will still come to my table as HR, fire this person without any tangible reason. I will not. The truth is that I will investigate it and do what is right.
Okay, at least some things I've had so far in the last few minutes, I've had the word check with the policy. I've had the word investigation. Okay, I like that. So we'll go to Williams. After Williams, we'll go to my sister, Pearl. Good to see you, Pearl. Williams, please.
Okay, good evening, and thank you for the session. I don't know. I think this is a very sensitive topic, and just the fact that it can grow tentacles just makes it something that might be difficult for policies to handle. I know that some organizations, as a matter of best practice, would advise against. So they do not want this situation to ever be accommodated, right? So that they don't have to deal with the potential tentacles. That is the input I wanted to make, right? So I would rather want to be in that space where this is not allowed to happen.
I like that. So you want to be in that preventive space, that don't even let it happen where possible. Okay, thank you so much, Williams. Before I quickly yield the floor to Pearl, please be on standby. Let me just quickly read this comment by my brother here. And I think he's responding to one of the comments by one of our very own earlier. And it's talking about a situation where a particular line manager, senior manager, so to speak, dated one subordinate, after a while, dropped her, picked another subordinate, and so on and so forth. So he is saying, don't you think he is becoming a threat to the organization? Whether you like it or not, words will fly out, and people will tag the organization as a place where superiors share and exchange opposite sex. Just his thought. You have the floor, Pearl.
Okay, thank you, Oluyemi. Good evening, all.
Good
evening, Oluyemi. So,
Good evening.
if I find out that a senior manager is dating a direct report, I think the first thing I want to do is to speak with the senior manager to just let him know the risks that could be associated with this kind of relationship. Risk of sexual harassment, risk of perceived favoritism. It could be maybe conflict of interest, just to let him know that while this may be genuine, but this is how it could appear. Then I would also speak to the employee separately. I'm going to speak with the person separately because I also want to find out, is it consensual, or is maybe the person was cajoled into it and doesn't have a choice when we talk about power imbalance. And depending on that, if it's something that maybe is consensual and I've made them understand the risk, I'll probably move the junior employee to a different department, just so that they can avoid all those risks. If it is perceived as the person was cajoled or doesn't have a choice in the matter, then I will take it up more seriously with the senior manager, because it could cause harassment and spoil the organization's name in the long run. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I like all these perspectives that you have laid bare. Okay, Victoria is saying, what if it is one of the executive that is doing this? Chidi is saying, how about if the employee went into it for job security? Good questions that we are raising and we are asking. Now, let's see. Again, don't mention any organization here. Can you think of one incident in your organization? When we say in your organization, it may be where you are working or anywhere you have worked in your last 5 or last 10 organizations, or like we also say, we are asking for a friend. Okay, can you think of one incident in your organization or that you've heard of that almost became a scandal? So it didn't crystallize into a scandal. Maybe it didn't go viral. Okay, what do you think was missed? Which system failed? Is it a policy that failed? Is it a process that failed? Is it a culture failure? Okay, so I want us to speak to this from our experience or something we become very, very aware and cautious of. Meanwhile, let me just share a story in one of my many, many lives. So there was this particular line manager, you know, it was the head of unit, let's use that word unit. And he was dating an entry-level officer. Okay, so like a senior manager dating an entry-level officer. Fantastic. OG, you will take the floor. I was sharing my story to hold forth for somebody to volunteer, but I'll resume my story post your contributions and commentary. OG, you have the floor, please.
All right, thank you, sir, and good evening, everyone. So, in one organization I worked in the past, I don't know how many of us recall the year that Horrible Bosses was a thing online.
Yeah, toxic workplace and bosses.
Yeah, Horrible Bosses. So the organization I was with at the time, we narrowly, when I say narrowly, we narrowly missed being there. At the time, momentum started to build about how horrible the working conditions were in that organization. I think the general, the general momentum around Horrible Bosses had shifted, right, at that initial year. But I think a year or so afterwards, it came up again, right, about people were talking about Horrible Bosses. And when I went through the email thread, although at the time I had actually left the organization, but I went through because it was on Twitter, I went through the thread on Twitter and I saw that yet again, right, people had mentioned the organization and they had mentioned how the working conditions were and things like that. So when it comes to which system failed, unfortunately, the reason why things got as bad as it was because leadership was not willing to let go of a certain level of leadership. And this is usually seen in either one-man businesses or, small partnerships and things like that. So as you continue to grow and as the business continues to expand, right, as a CEO or as, a managing partner or whoever, right, your role should now be strategy and then starting to get in competent people to lead, right, alongside with you. But the leadership at that time was not confident or trusting of putting the company in other people's hands. And so they wanted to be the ones responsible for every little thing. And that wouldn't be such a problem if they really had people management skills, but they didn't. And so it led to a lot of hostility in the organization. It led to a very unhealthy environment such that, year on year, there was a negative perception, right, about the organization, even from people that had not worked there before. So for the system is just that leadership failed to lead, basically. Thank you, and over.
Thank you so much, Oji. Thank you for sharing. Okay, I like the fact that you are able to pinpoint the failure points to leadership. And you will see the question we're asking here, which failed? Is it policy? Is it process or culture? And that is intentional so that we can know that you may have policy, but your processes may be failing. In fact, you may have policy and process and your culture may be failing. Okay, and it's also possible that you don't even have a policy to start with, and consequently, people are behaving anyhow. But let me shock you, there are instances where you may not even have policy, but because of your core values and culture, people may not necessarily be misbehaving. Sandra, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Doc. So I'll just add to what Oji just shared, right? In an organization where I worked before, so on paper, it's really structured, has a board, has the C-suite and all, but in reality, it was a one-man rulership system where power resided at the center, HR was just a figurehead, advisory was from the center and it changes with emotion or hearsay, right? And so typically people who have found favor with the MD were usually the star boy and star girl. They had privileges and all. So a particular employee who was in this inner circle would have access to, stuff that other employees didn't. And it was glaring, it was rubbed in. At some point, the promotion it happened like 3 times in a year and came with perks and with salary reviews.
Wow.
However, in one of those promotions, it was obvious that this person lacked the competence for that role. And then there was now major fallout because people who were authority in those fields couldn't take instructions from, quote and unquote, a small girl. And it was showing. And in 3 months, this person had to leave because he
Wow.
couldn't give instructions on subjects you didn't understand. And every other person just knew that, for you to go here, just know where you go. Do you know? So everyone knew that the hard work didn't pay, your intelligence didn't matter, your days of experience didn't matter. Just be on the good side, right? And again, outsiders were watching, and because these were people of opposite sex, people were beginning to say, if you tell me, say, forgive my language, say, nothing day, right? If you tell me, say, nothing day. And when this person, yeah, and when this person eventually had to leave, there were different conspiracy theories about why this person eventually had to leave, here and there. So what failed? I think process failed, one, because people who were hired to do their job weren't given the power that they require to do it. So delegating is one thing, but assigning corresponding authority to do your job. So you had HR, but they were not giving the power to function, to advise properly, to say, oh, this person lacks the competence. This person can't move from point A to point B without necessary appraisals, without necessarily consulting with the department heads. It doesn't work. Even the suits were not carried around. So process failed, and also structure was a problem because it was good on paper, but in reality, it was a one-man rulership business. So structure is very key when it comes to scandals, because if you have a board that is able to hold, and just let me add here, the founders who are CEOs who are appointed by the board are able to hold themselves more accountable than CEOs who are also founders. So where you would find this issue of scandal here and there, if you check very deeply, they're usually maybe top people who are either founders or co-founders or who are very high stake in the business and really do not have anyone or group to hold them to accountability. So that's my contribution.
Very beautiful. Very beautiful. Thank you so much, Sandra. I love that. Victoria, please, it's your turn. All you need to do is
Thank you. Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
sorry. It was the way I got into the call. Apologies. So I just wanted to mention something. And while I see that the options were policy, process, or culture,
it's
I
not
think a big,
exhaustive.
So
Yeah.
a bigger piece, right? That
Yes.
over time, based on, my discussion with people, I've been in one organization for a long time, and I've worked with a lot of other startups and, quite a lot of people across different organizations just to support. One thing I've realized and I see as a synonymous thing to all of them is the leadership. So you see, policy, process, or culture is tied to the kind of leadership an organization has. And I would like to give a typical example. And thankfully, the last contributor mentioned something.
Yeah.
An appointed CEO and a CEO who founded the company, their outputs are usually very different. Trust me. And you can compare it with, look at all these organizations that they do like rotational CEOs. You were a CEO for 10 years. Somebody else is in line for succession. There's an objective trajectory to it. Your competence, there are so many things they put into it. So it's not like there are no politics there, but the majority of it is everything, people management, competence, social network, and all those things are put into consideration. And then you put all these things together, and it's not just about oh, because I own this business, it was me that went to look for money. I can make any decision that I like. You will see that their leadership style, and they uphold the policies, they uphold the process, they uphold the culture, because they understand that it is not about me. It's about what we are building. I am just a funnel. I will pass through this journey. Somebody else will take over. But you see the other side, founder, co-founder, it is all about me. I own this shop. If I close down the shop, nobody will do anything to me. That attitude is why we have a lot of these issues. So I believe that, you see, processes that failed is because the leadership does not uphold the process. They don't help anybody. HR is going to be struggling. HR is just there for what's it called? Regulatory requirements, or yes, or for the process of, let's make sure that there's yes compliance requirement. That's my word I was looking for. Thank you. HR is there for compliance. Let us know we have HR. Everything HR is doing, and it's not as if HR doesn't want to do the right thing, but HR cannot succeed if they don't have leadership buy-in and support. Everywhere in the world that HR is succeeding, one thing is clear across all those companies: they have leadership buy-in. Anything they want to roll out, leadership is the first person at the forefront, helping them to make noise, people to say, for example, performance evaluation. I know organizations where HR does not send reminder to any employee. You know why? When they roll out performance evaluation, the CEO is the first person that completes his own. He's downline at the EDs. If my ED has completed his appraisal, please, who am I that have not completed my appraisal? But then you have organizations where the CEO is telling everybody, go and complete. He has never completed no appraisal. Then the people who are his favorites, they'll be telling you, do you think it's by appraisal? Well, the person that will be promoted will be promoted. You'll be sending reminder every 2 days. Nobody is answering. So at the end of the day, everything boils down to leadership. If we have the right leadership, which I feel is something that we should talk more about, and I like this kind of session, if we have the right leadership, everything just falls into place and makes everyone's life easy. If you will enjoy companies like that, you understand what objectivity is, you understand what it is to be competent at the job. What do you need to do? Like, it's to be clear on the things that you need to know, things you need to grow in your career. But when you start to have these leadership issues, everything becomes boring. You don't even know, what am I doing the right thing? You can't tell, because all the shenanigans and all the politics that are playing is overshadowing the real problems that you are supposed to be facing and dealing with. And then you go to another company and you start to question your own competence just because of this leadership issue. So that's my own contribution. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm enjoying this session. Thank you for your contributions, your comments, your insights, and your vulnerability, everyone. And that's how I particularly conceptualize this particular session. Okay, so that's why I didn't give too many stories about that. I was giving more details about the other stories. I wanted it to be organic from within, so that we're not focusing on other people's scandals in quotes. So let me quickly wrap up the story I was trying to share. Okay, all right. I think I need to read this. It's quite long, from Gabriel on the group. All right, so he says here that there is one HR officer that brought his female friend. Please pay attention to this. Brought his female friend, working as third party under him. But the closeness of the lady and one of the senior in the department was very tight. And this lady started misbehaving with the HR officer that brought her, and he's her line manager. But the trust was that the HR officer who was to woo her before bringing her to work. But since she didn't accept his proposal, the HR officer started seeing her like a friend and nothing with them again. But the senior officer wasn't happy with the HR officer, and the lady did something wrong, and the HR officer reported her to the HR manager. The lady apologized, and after a few days, the HR manager called the HR officer with the senior HR and said the HR officer is threatening the lady to date her, and due to the lady's closeness with the senior HR officer, she screenshot all the HR officer's conversation with the lady before she joined the organization and used it as evidence, and the manager then was focused and then almost suspended the HR officer. Now, one thing I like about this story I quickly read is that you see that almost all the players, the stakeholders, are all in HR. Officer, senior, manager. So things they happen. Things they happen. Let me quickly attempt to finish my story. So I told you about the the head of HR, no, not head of HR now, the head of a unit, okay, that was dating an entry-level officer in the unit. They dated for like over a year. Real life story. In one of the places I worked, the relationship was mutual and consensual. Now, the man, the head of unit, was married. The lady knew, so there was full disclosure of the status. Now, it was so good that at even a point, the head of unit and the officer went on leave at the same time, and they both went to Dubai for like 2 weeks. Both in the same unit, and they both went, their leave was the same window, same start date, same end date. They went to Dubai. It was the head of unit who, of course, facilitated the, what do you call it, the flight tickets, the visa, the airport pickup, the lodgings, the tours, everything. Like 18 months later, I don't know what happened. So let's just say, for lack of a better word, expression, the young officer decided she was no longer interested. That maybe she too wanted to maybe get a, in quotes, a younger guy and settle down. That she wanted to stop playing around. And the older head of unit felt, after all my investments, I have not completely cashed out, I've not gotten the adequate return on investments. So something that was consensual now became transited to harassment. Guess where it played out eventually? In the next major performance appraisal cycle, the guy, head of unit, now like marks her down in almost everything possible. And then the lady, and in that organization, there is like a performance review committee that you could escalate any perceived injustice or maltreatment in the appraisal. So, when you are submitting your petition, let's use that word, petition, you have to try and justify or substantiate why you think your performance appraisal was unjust. So typically, what kind of data or details do people provide? Maybe evidence of job done, project closed, testimonials from third party, and so on and so forth. Of course, she tried to attach all that. She now also alluded to withdrawing her consent from dating it, and she now provided receipts. Ladies and gentlemen, it is still one of the most interesting disciplinary process I've been through in my life. But the first thing we did as HR in this organization, the department where it happened was not HR, was we immediately moved the lady from that unit and transferred her. Note, this was not about, is the man guilty or not? Is she lying or saying the truth? No. We first of all separated them. Why? Protection, or at least second level protection. Because irrespective of the outcome, that kind of relationship from a workplace perspective can hardly ever be smooth again. Of course, we had to engage with the lady to find out how she wanted us to treat our request. We even gave her the option that, do you want us to treat it informally or formally? And then we guided her. She opted for formal process, and we let her know the advantages and disadvantages, and so on and so forth. And of course, we went through all the investigative process and so on and so forth. Eventually, so cut long story short, the man was seen to have been subjective in his appraisal, and he was seen to have been victimizing the lady in a way, even though the appraisal was not overturned, because it's like moving from strong 2-2 to from weak 2-2 to strong 2-2, because the independent panel reevaluated that. So she was still in 2-2. I'm using 2-2 because we all understand what 2-2 is, but she now moved from weak 2-2 to strong 2-2. Okay. Of course, the guy was suspended for about a month, and then when he returned, he was also redeployed, and so on and so forth. So things happen, and things can start on a good note and then deteriorate. Naza, your hands are up. Please, over to you.
Okay, sir. I just have a question, right? Because
Yeah.
you mentioned and somebody else mentioned moving maybe the person, the victim, for lack of a better word now, to another unit. What if there is no other unit to move the person to? What if the person is just maybe like a specialist and the person is meant to be like in a particular department? What do we do in that instance?
Can you move the perpetrator? That's another option.
What if they cannot move any of them?
Okay, so now that you know that there is an issue, can you move the reporting line or duplicate the reporting line? What do I mean by duplicate? This is hypothetical. So assuming the lady, I'm assuming the victim is a lady, always mails the HOD. We now say going forward, once you are mailing the HOD, be copying HR. And once you copy the HR, when the HOD is responding, you too must copy HR. So that way you put a neutral authority in the loop. The purpose is to ensure that workflow does not get distorted anymore. Because one of the things that guy, when that lady stopped dating him, he started giving her the cold treatment. You understand? So you want to first and foremost make sure that work is not disrupted anymore. Okay. And then you go through the disciplinary process and provide sanctions where somebody is actually culpable. And then you also try to create, if depending on the kind of harassment. Now, I'm not talking about sexual orientation now. There are certain harassments or victimization that maybe people offended each other. You can mediate, get to the roots of the conflict, and get forgiveness, depending on the nature of the issue, please. So it's not in all issues, but there are instances where one party may have to go. And typically the perpetrator, especially, that will send a strong signal to the organization that, yes, you may be a star player, you may be bringing huge revenue to the company, but if your culture doesn't align with our organization and you can lead us to the precipice of a scandal, okay, we want to treat it as much as possible. Tochukwu says here, apart from changing reporting lines, suspension may also consider until the investigation is concluded. Yes, that's very, very important. Okay, so let's keep our thought comments coming. So this is the HR ethical blueprint. For example, policy. Do you have adequate anti-harassment whistleblowing rules? So anti-harassment clearly states what is harassment and what is not harassment. I'll give you an example. There have been few instances where you have a line manager, man or woman, who is very fair, always demanding for accountability and results. And people will say that line manager is harassing us. And when you look at it intently, you will see that there's no harassment here. This person, if you tell you, agree with him that this report will be ready in 4 days, he wants it in 4 days. You understand? So this kind of person is like a result-oriented person. They follow the rules. So you need to be sure when somebody is a productivity driver versus when the person is actually harassing other people. Sometimes there may be a thin line. Okay, so you are looking at legal compliance. The whistleblowing here is, can people who feel victimized escalate? That's one. 2, can people who sense other people are victimized escalate? Let me say it again. 1, if I Oluyemi feel victimized, can I escalate? 2, if Tochukwu thinks Oluyemi is victimized, can Tochukwu escalate on my behalf? Some people are timid, they don't want to escalate. Can a neutral colleague use our whistleblowing platform to say, we suspect this is going on and people may want to pay attention to this? So you will see that second option provides an additional layer to protect the organization and to help the organization detect when things are not going well. The second thing here is the process, okay? Fair investigation and reporting. And the outcome here is what? Accountability, okay? Then, okay, so let's take Sandra, please. Over to you, Sandra.
Thank you very much. So I want to react to speaking up on behalf of colleagues, right? So I've had cases where we've gotten whistleblowing or this sort of feedback, and then you call the employee in question to, say, oh, we got an anonymous XYZ feedback. How do you want us to go about it? Do you want to put a formal complaint? How do you want HR to come in? And they tell you, oh, no, everything is fine. Maybe some will tell you, oh, the powers that be, or no, let the sleeping dog lie. What should HR do at that point where, as HR, you've observed it, maybe the person in question has a track record of harassment or bullying, but because you need a formal feedback, pen to paper, to be able to carry out next steps, and nobody's coming forth, or everyone just wants to let the sleeping dog lie, what should HR do, even though you've gotten an informal, anonymous feedback saying, oh, I think this is going on, I think this is going on?
Okay. Thank you so much. I love this question. Very, very good question, and very helpful question to the subject matter we are discussing. In no particular order, I will suggest some things. Note that my suggestions too may be context specific and context appropriate. It may not be appropriate, or it may not work in all settings. All right. So it's not like they are universal things. The one thing you can do is to treat the situation anonymously. What do I mean, treat the situation anonymously? Imagine you send an email, maybe from HR, okay, to all male staff. So you are not targeting the culprits. You just send to all male staff that their male colleagues, our attention has been drawn to the fact that there is a senior professional, and you, as much as possible, describe what that person is doing, and also paints how that behavior is impacting negatively on the culprit or the victim. And then you let them know that we are watching you. And you will now draw the attention to the relevant portions of the employee handbook that, prohibits victimization, harassment, discrimination, and so on and so forth. Some of the time, I didn't say all, you will see some people will shift. They will make adjustments. That's one. You throw a general blanket. The advantage of throwing that general blanket is, because they reported one person, you may be shocked that 3 people may be doing it. But it's only one that they have come to report. So in this instance, all the 3 will take notice. Then there may be a 4th and 5th person that are planning to start doing it. They are planning. They may be cautious. Okay. If your existing handbook or laws does not adequately, robustly cover it, you may use the opportunity to revise the relevant sections of the employee handbook or come up with new protocols entirely, and then you disseminate. When I say disseminate, we're not talking about one time. So you can do 1 month war against harassment. So you can take week 1, sexual harassment, week 2, mental harassment, week 3, different kind of, there's a way you will talk about something to the extent that the person will know that something is up. You get, you will just, it's just like if EFCC in your area, you will see that Yahoo boys for the next 2-3 days, they will just adjust. Even if they have no bad plans, they won't even go out. They'll say, why are we seeing EFCC wearing red vest? So that's one. The other one approach is that you will go and meet the person that is being alleged to be victimizing. And then one-to-one, man-to-man, woman-to-woman, or you look for that person's a peer or a superior, maybe from the board or from the management, and you bring that in, say, look, we have gotten 3 whistleblowing on this. Now only you work up. Based on what we know about you, we don't want to believe it. But 2-3 anonymous whistleblowing is too close for comfort. They say there's no smoke without fire. Please, if there's anything you are doing that may be directly or indirectly making people insinuate that you may be harassing, victimizing, or doing something like this, please, can you put an end to it, please? For the sake of our organization and our management. again, I'm sure they will be upset. No, who said it? No, I need evidence. You say it is whistleblowing. And once there is a whistleblowing situation, part of the protection in whistleblowing policies that the whistleblower will be protected. So if you don't have a whistleblowing policy, you even need to come up with it so that people can see that HR or management cannot disclose a whistleblower, because that's one of the benefits or confidence any whistleblower must enjoy. Because if a whistleblower is not protected, what happens the next time is that nobody will whistleblow again, because a whistleblower will now become a victim of victimization. All right. Again, people tend to adjust. Okay. So that may work. The general approach to everybody, and then the specific approach. The honest truth is, it is not everybody who is comfortable escalating. Another thing, there's this Me Too movement. One of the things that made it popular is that I think there were some allegations of some sexual harassment or something. And other people now started saying, me too, I have faced it. So a lot of people now came out eventually to now convict the main perpetrator. And I'm saying this respectfully. There is this American actor. I think we should remember him, Bill Cosby. I don't know. He's a very old actor, comedy. He's not a new old school. You see that there was a point, I think before he was convicted, they just continue to get comments like, oh, he harassed me. So I think the original person who petitioned himself could not get enough evidence to name him. But because what do you call it now? The issue became a public issue. Many other people who had been victims at one point or the other, but who were quiet, who maybe didn't have the courage. They were teenagers there. They couldn't complain. They felt, oh, if we complain, who will people believe? Bill Cosby or me, a nobody, in quotes, or just an ordinary citizen? So eventually, other people summoned the courage to come out. So the third thing you can do, you say, oh, we've had information that one or two people are maybe victimizing, sexually harassing people here. If you have been a victim, please come forward to HR. We'll assure you of confidentiality. Now, you've thrown it open. Now, the serial player hardly ever victimizes one person, especially over time. They do it to multiple people. One way or the other, they will have been careless. There will be somebody that will have receipts, whether screenshots, whether voice recording, whether, and so on and so forth. So somehow, people will adjust, or you will have some evidence to be able to pin them. Yeah, HR should launch an independent investigation. So culture is very key. HR action here, leadership modeling. And Sandra spoke extensively about leadership. What's his name? The main guy who pushes leadership a lot, John Maxwell, said everything rises and falls on what? Leadership. And then, of course, psychological safety. Okay, no problem. Of course, all our sessions are always on YouTube. The YouTube channel is Oluyemi Adeosun. Oluyemi Adeosun. It will be uploaded tonight. All right. So when you build leadership modeling and psychological safety, the outcome is, of course, trust. The last but not the least is data. So do you even have any record at all, historical, on misconduct trends, and then dashboard? And why do you want to have data? And why do you want to share and project this data? You want to prevent prevention. You want to lead to what? Prevention and deterrence. I remember there was a place I used to work. Every month or every quarter, depending on the volume of infractions, we created a newsletter called Sanctions Diary. Sanctions Diary. Note, in the Sanctions Diary, we will describe the offense. We will describe maybe the disciplinary process and the disciplinary outcome. Note, we won't mention name. So we're not going to say Oluyemi Adeosun slapped somebody that was watching his webinar. No, we'll just say a certain individual did this, and this person escalated this. And we saw that as we were reporting through the sanctions diary, it was creating awareness, and in a way, it was creating gist. In fact, people used to wait for the monthly or quarterly sanctions diary from HR. But over time, we saw that certain infractions reduced. Because what better way to tell people that if you do this, and this, you will be punished? For example, maybe there's something we used to call persistent late coming. Note that word, assistant or perennial. And typically we judge in that organization persistent late coming as anybody that comes late more than 10 times in a month. So it's not 2 times. But in the past, people used to let it go. Then we started taking it serious. So when you are reported for persistent late coming, how do we know there is a record, the attendance or the biometrics? Then you get first written warning. Meanwhile, in that organization, any infraction you do in 6 months, after that, it will be what? Final written warning. So if you are really a serial latecomer, you can be terminated in 6 months, or you will manage and behave yourself for 6 months, and then you go back to what? Lateness. So when you have data like this, so it's not data that only HR knows, you share it. Oh, in 2024, we had 3 reports of sexual harassment. We had 2 reports of discrimination. We had 2 reports of bullying. Let people know. And send them, of course, don't mention anybody, but once people know that, oh, HR is even keeping record, it drives the outcome called prevention. Okay, very, very important. I hope we'll see 1 or 2 things we are not doing that we can add to what we are doing already. Okay, so some of the prevention toolkits: culture audit and pulse survey, ethical leadership scorecard, anonymous reporting channels, regular training, and manager coaching. So you have to, is one thing that is in our employee handbook or is in our policies. At least once a year, it must be in one of the policies you quickly do in Q1. It can be a crash course. What's bullying? What's harassment? What are the kind of jokes you cannot, you're telling a woman, for example, I like your shape, your breast is full, all those kind of things. You need to detail what can be seen as, some people will say, I'm just playing with her. We must define a reasonable play, So let me quickly just share this on a lighter note around this, and for those of you who've met me one-on-one, I'm very tall. I'm 6'7". So Zoom doesn't do justice to my height. I remember a place I worked in the past. We did all the interview process via Zoom. So the first day at work, they almost fainted when they saw my height. Of course, they were not trying to hire me because of my height. It's not a basketball club. But back to my main story. So this particular lady, real life, I was working somewhere back then. She just came to meet me. I remember very vividly. She came to meet me. It was at the cafeteria. So in that organization provides lunch for all staff, but you go to the cafeteria and you are served there. So I was at the cafeteria. I was on the queue waiting for my turn to be served. So we had cafeteria staff that were our staff. This lady comes there and she said, please pay attention. Tallest. That's me she's calling. At work. Please, look at Akim. Please, I want to report Akim. I said, yes, what about Akim? Guess what she said? She said, Akim is calling me Orobo. I'll say that again. She said, tallest. Please, I want to report Akim to you. What did Akim do? Akim is calling me fat woman. Orobo means fatty bombo in local language. And immediately, I looked at her. I won't mention her name, but I will never forget. I said, my sister, what did you just call me? She said, I called you tallest. And I said, and it is okay for you to call me that? Say, what's wrong? I said, okay, what did Akim call you? Said, Akim called me fat woman. I said, what is the difference between what Akim called you and what you called me? I'm tall, you called me tallest. You are big, she called you. Said, no. I'm calling you tallest with endearment. I said, who defines what endearment is? To cut the long story short, that was how I closed the case. I just told her right there and then that if in HR, I see the petition from Hakim, me too, I will write a petition against her for calling me tallest. Thankfully, there were like 20 people when she called me my own tallest. So again, real life thing that happened to me, that was how I died. But do you see how she felt, in quote, she doesn't think calling me tallest is body shaming, but she thinks being called fat is body shaming. Who defines what body shaming is? So that's why it's important in the organization that we provide clarity to gray areas and borderline issues. What is disrespect? When we say, oh, in this organization, mutual respect, what is disrespect? If I ask my line manager that, please, can you provide evidence of this? Is that disrespectful? Or I'm just challenging the process? So please don't assume, especially when you have a multi-generational workforce, okay? The baby boomers, the Gen Z, the millennials, and Alpha. We look at the same scenario from different prisms, different paradigms, and different perspectives. Are we together? Let me also share this example here. Real life, way back. I went for an interview, a job interview in Abuja. It was a federal government job. Maybe if I got that job, maybe you won't be listening to me today. I'll be a big boy now. Just kidding. So it was a federal government job. They were attending to each candidate on the average between 45 minutes and 1 hour. It was a panel, a 5-man panel or thereabouts. So around 1 o'clock, this particular candidate that we had been waiting patiently for our turn since 8 a.m., he got to his turn and he spent like 3 or 4 minutes and he came out. So we felt, sometimes when you are doing interview, what happens is if a candidate comes in, they may say, oh, give us 5 minutes. Maybe they are still discussing the last candidate, that kind of a thing. He said, no, that they didn't tell him to go out and come back, that they are done with the interview. We said, what happened? He said when he got in, he said, good afternoon, guys. And they walked him out. Of course, maybe like 3 o'clock when I finally entered. I said, what? I almost prostrated. Do you know why? All the 5 people, men and women, they had white hair. You know what it means to be a director in federal government ministry? By the time you're a director, even if you have a fast-track career, you'll be like 50, 55, 60. They had white hair. My man said, how can you say guys to these mamas and papa Oshorongas like this? May village people not follow us. But why did they bounce him? They felt he was what? Rude and disrespectful. But we, his peers, knew by him saying, good afternoon, guys, he was greeting them. Of course, that may be an extreme example in an interview. But do you know that there are some situations at workplace that is different perspective that is causing? So that's why regular training and manager coaching is important. Okay, very, very important. And as much as possible, where possible, Adiola says the Oshoro guys. It's true that you are telling Oshoro guys, you are calling them guys. Okay. The last but not the least is board level reporting on people risk. You see, if I can, I'll still do something around HR and board. You see, it's good when there is visibility to the board on HR reporting. Even if HR is now not on the board level, at least they typically have a subcommittee on maybe HR and remuneration or something, appointment and promotion, so that you are reporting. If you are reporting to the board, things like victimization, bullying, harassment, anything that can water down your corporate governance systems, anything that can weaken your organizational culture, if you are escalating it regularly to the board, at least you get buy-in and you get support. So at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, as much as possible, yes, we are talking about scandals, but we don't want it to happen. We don't want it to crystallize. So we want to prevent, not just punish. Punishment means it has happened. Yes, we will punish if it has happened, but our priority is let us what? Prevent in the first place. Ladies and gentlemen, next, we also want to protect. Okay, so we want a process that can protect. We want a process that can protect. Then we also want to measure trust, not silence. don't, ladies and gentlemen, never misinterpret that because people are not reporting. Don't misinterpret it to mean that things are not happening. Well, it may be a possibility that things are not happening, but sometimes it is not silence. It is a lack of trust. And when people don't trust, they will be what? They will be silent. So don't just take silence for it is not happening. You know, there's one movie, The Great Debaters. If you have not watched that movie, great time one day watch it. It's an old movie, but it's a very good movie. What's this guy's name? Denzel Washington, very good movie, old movie. Not those movies that have storyline, great debaters, and they were really debating. And in one of the debates, the person said he created a desolation and he called it peace. I'll never forget that sentence. I'm still talking about silence. He said somebody created a desolation. You know what a desolation is? You wipe out everybody. You know, I said now there is peace. Meanwhile, that's not peace. Again, ladies and gentlemen, as we empower the leaders in the organization, we must empower bystanders. Bystanders are people that something is not happening to, but they are concerned enough to blow a whistle, to escalate, to interfere. Okay? Also, let's embed as much as possible fairness in our performance metrics. Ladies and gentlemen, let me begin to attempt to wrap up this conversation. Okay? And then take a few comments and contributions if you want. How can we use data as an early warning? Data. And where are some of these data? One, our exit interview. Let me also add another one quickly to it. I forgot to add it. Our stay interviews too. Okay, so in our exit interview, you need to monitor the reasons for people leaving. Now, two things. You know, some of us, our exit interview, actually give people a form to fill, maybe online or physically. That's good. But beyond telling people to fill, have a conversation. The more informal you make the conversation, the better. For example, if you can afford it, can the exit interview be over lunch or breakfast? It gives you this, oh, let me buy you your last lunch today. The person say, hey, HR is buying lunch. It won't look like, question one, what did you like most about your stay in KKK? Question two, what could we have done to retain you? Question, it sounds mechanistic and robot, like you are AI. Okay, so when you check the themes in the exit interviews, you can somewhat detect toxic leadership. Okay, some ladies, for example, they will not escalate or petition sexual harassment. They will just be resigning. Okay, so engagement trust index, quarterly survey questions. What does that do? We measure our HR credibility. Sometimes too, in some systems, you may see a gender gap. Okay, your annual audit, and this can help us identify a fairness indicator as the case may be. All right. So I think we'll just skip this. So, some of the questions we've asked so far today, these are possible responses in no particular order. One, you want to escalate investigation to an independent HR officer. You want to activate a whistleblower protection protocol. Okay, if you have a board of audit and ethics committee, you may also want to report. And then you want to communicate process transparency to staff. All right. So as much as possible, audit your trust indicators within 90 days. I hope you, by now, at least for all of us that we started this conversation today together, you understand what trust indicators is. The confidence of people to report to HR or to report to management. Okay, train all managers on ethical leadership, create a people risk for your board. Ladies and gentlemen, every HR scandal begins where silence is what? Tolerated. For emphasis, let me reiterate. Every HR scandal begins where what? Silence is tolerated. Very, 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 very key. All right. Any comments, contributions, closing remarks, or thoughts? Any comments, any contributions or thoughts, or maybe even any question?
I just want to say thank you for the wonderful session. It was a lot of insights. I really appreciate it, especially on the people part. Sometimes be on the HR side, there are gray areas that you might not really even be paying attention to. So this has really been very insightful, especially on the frequent audit on HR. I like the parts where you mentioned that the fact that people are not reporting doesn't mean things are not happening. And where there's a lot of silence, you have to now pay attention to why there's silence. Truly, there might be nothing happening, but keeping your ear to the ground and ensuring that really nothing is happening is the safest place. And just like you said, the day the thing will blow up, they will be asking you, but you're in this company all these days, you don't know that all this water is passing under your table. You don't know. So I really like that awareness you're creating for all of us to always keep our ears to the ground and also ensure that, you don't be, there are companies where people will tell you that, oh, HR is just management henchmen. We have to try to demystify that we are employees as well. We work for management, but we are also supposed to be the ears of the employee. And if they don't trust us, then at the end of the day, you're just more like you're just ticking a box in the company. The impact that you really want to make, you'll not be able to make it. So thank you so, so much, for providing, taking out your time to go through this with us. So really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Thank you, Victoria. Thank you so much. Something crossed my mind as we were speaking, and let me just drop it. You see, in our induction, especially for young girls, when I say young girls, maybe IT. And when I mean IT, I mean the real IT, university undergraduates. That level of IT is different from graduate interns. Please let them sensitize them to things like harassment and so on and so forth. Because some men, forgive me, some men, they target young ladies like a prey, and they flash things at them or threaten them. And because they are new in the system, they succumb not because they want to, but because they are afraid. Also, vulnerable women, maybe women that are maybe cleaners, office assistants, let's sensitize them that you can report, because some of them feel they are too junior to report a man wearing suit. Okay, let's sensitize them. It will also help. Let me take OG, and then we wrap up with Tochukwu. OG, my sister.
All right, thank you, sir. I just have a question, really, and it borders around how to manage an older colleague who doesn't have. So this person is a member of the HR team. How do you manage this person who is much older but doesn't really have the required drive, right, or motivation, or maybe initiative is the word I'm looking for, such that things just keep the level of performance is not where it should be, and it affects everything, employee experience. So, you spoke about the reason for exits, you spoke about the reasons for motivation and all those things. How do you manage this person, to increase their drive, their motivation, and their growth, but they just seem to be stuck in a box? And this person is much, much older. So how do you manage that dynamic, and how do you get them to push, right, before management comes with those blows to say, oh, why wasn't this done? Knowing that this person is actually responsible for ensuring that these things are done, but they didn't do it. And so management is now having to come full force and say, hey, why wasn't this done? How do you manage such a person?
Okay, so is this older person reporting to you like your subordinate?
The person is not officially my subordinate. They did have the conversation to say, look, we want you to now manage this person. But in things like this, it's always good to have documentation. So unless it has been officially communicated to me, I am yet to assume the role. So that official communication is yet to be made. So far it was just a verbal communication that this person is now going to report to you. And they haven't had that conversation with the other person to say, oh, we need you to understand and know that you are now reporting to this person. So basically there's been no communication, no official communication yet. And so we maintain status quo.
So I would suggest you continue to maintain that status quo, because if there's no documented memo to say that is reporting to you, or you are not providing oversight, any intervention you provide, especially, I don't want to go cultural, depending on his tribe. And when I say tribe, you can be your tribe, but you are exposed, or you can be your tribe. I don't want to say more than that. Some people, from their tribal orientation, they even don't want to, if it's a man, for example, they don't really like deferring to a woman. How much more when they are now actually biologically older than the woman? I'm trying to bring out all the different dynamics around this thing. But what I can say, let's assume that this person has been communicated to, that is reporting to you formally, officially. I would like to suggest that as much as possible, as respectful as possible, approach this person. All of us, no matter who we are, we have aspiration. Even if the aspiration is I want to retire well. We should want to grow. Don't let me say we want to grow. We should want to grow. Okay. But have a heart-to-heart conversation to say, these are the expectations. For example, if you say the person doesn't have drive, you can't tell him that, sir, you don't have drive. You have to spell out through KPIs what drive is. So if drive is initiate 3 employee engagement program per quarter, do 3 L&D trainings per year. So you must be able to break down what drive is in black and white in terms of activities, key performance indicator, or objectives and key results. So please don't tell him you don't have drive. You just say for 2026, for example, as you are agreeing his KPI for him, the KPI will just mirror drive. The KPI will mirror initiative, whatever concerns. So avoid the word you don't have drive, you don't have initiative, you are not motivated. What is motivation? Turn motivation to an assignment, to a task, to a project that is visible when done, partly done, not done at all. And then you take your performance appraisal serious. So when I say that, maybe you meet with him, for example, don't say this is too much. Maybe you have a stand-up meeting every day, 10 minutes, or you have a weekly unit meeting. Then you have monthly performance review. Then you have quarterly performance review. You take it very seriously. We call it close marking in football, close marking. If there is also in the organization any other elderly senior person like him, but who demonstrates all this proactiveness, initiatives, motivation, assign that person as a mentor or as a coach. Brief that person, because sometimes if I'm old and I feel old and you give me a mentor who is even maybe older than me and living out all the values and the virtues and the practices you want, it's easier. But if you are the one telling me, I say it's not your fault. Maybe it's because you are younger than me, or you don't have this, you don't have that, or you have this and you have that. So those combinations can work. Why I pushed you to that performance appraisal is, at least that's the fairest way to edge anybody out in a system. The intention is not to edge out. The intention is to get them to deliver and perform. But if they are not performing, then you cannot put them on PIP. They say symptom persists after 2 days. Consult your doctor. So after the 3 months PIP, you can even say extended PIP. Then you can say bye-bye by December 2026. So you have a 1-year exit plan or a 1-year recovery or revival plan. The Lord give you understanding. Tochukwu, then we go to Victoria. After Victoria, we have closed. I hope I responded adequately to your query, please.
Yes, you did. Thank you. You gave me a very good idea about looking for a mentor. So I would look into that.
Okay. Tochukwu, you have been empowered to unmute now.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much. So basically, wanted to ask question around that exit interviews. You made mention about having that informal conversation, which could help on, give qualitative data that you really need to discuss. But oftentimes, exit interviews usually shine light on issues that has to do with mostly the process or the management, something people that they feel they could not fight against, or they could not even succeed even if they raise their voice, and now they are stepping out. And mostly you collect this data, aggregate it over time, and report it. It always gets bluffed off. Oh no, this is emotional reaction. I remember being in one situation like that, collecting data over time and all the data I collected, both formally and informally, put everything together, analyzed it. Everything is pointing to one source as the problem. And this is the CEO of the business. And then you approach him, okay, sir, this is the problem. From what everybody has been saying, this is what I see, as the issues. Can we look at this area and that? I said, no, these people, don't mind them. They are being emotional. Because I told this person not to do this, he's emotional. This person, I know who can make this kind of comment. I even try to bring some qualitative comments like, okay, this comments is how somebody felt. Oh, I know who made these comments, even though he guessed it wrongly, but he was almost very close. I know who must say this. It's because this thing happened the other day, that day. I'm okay. He was not beginning to tell me, this is what I tried to do. Did I do it wrong? He just doesn't understand. He does not have work experience. And I'm like, this is how people feel. This is the problem. Can we look at it? But they usually shrug it off. So how can we, as HR people, be able to present this information, especially when the person you are presenting it to is the person the data is pointing towards? How do we present it so that they can really accept it and work on it? Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you so much, Tochukwu. The good thing is that you are not alone. Even Chizoba can relate with the kind of scenario that you just described. Of course, that doesn't mean you're experiencing it. But let me say a few things. You see, some people are defensive. The moment what you are doing is not, you are praising them. Once you are providing them with any form of feedback that is, so to speak, negative, that is not like hyping them, praising them, they will block it. And they can explain away any negative feedback. Okay, and that's one of the reasons why that concept called 360-degree was introduced, so that you get feedback from all stakeholders. And then when we aggregate it, can everybody except you be lying? Now, 2, 3, 4 things in no particular order. This is one of the reasons why in today's slide, towards the twilight, I introduced board. That is why if you are sending, what do you call it, exit interview about the MD, the board should be interested in what's the exit interview. What is it saying about the MD and the leadership? There should be a board committee chairman that you can send that kind of thing to anonymously. And then they will find a way to engage. That's one. 2, if you can, this is why also we encourage that organizations to appoint externally or internally coaches for their C-level executives. So if there is a coach that the organization has hired, it can be for a 6-month basis or 1 year. It's the kind of feedback that the CEO will not take and act upon. You give it to the coach that this is part of the organizational concerns that you would like us to, of course, there will be strengths, there will be weaknesses, that these are part of the weaknesses. And then the coach will have the capacity to come up with a way to address it. Another thing is you can send the MD on training. When I say training, not Oluyemi and so-and-so, business school, executive programs, sometimes when they go for all these leadership courses extensively, slow but somehow they'll be seeing themselves in the mirror and they'll be correcting it. You know, I'm tempted to say number 4, you will pray. You know, because you know, most people who are CEOs, even when they are young, you know, there's a way success makes you very cocky. You know, let me give one example. There was one day, not too long ago, somebody just met me for the first time, and I spoke, and the person came to meet me and was now trying to tell me how to speak better. And I was paying attention to the person, even though, to be honest, a part of me was like, from where to where? Do you understand? But I was listening. I'm polite because I don't know him personally. So at some point, somebody else now came to meet him to say, do you know this person? So he now said, no, I didn't speak. The person now like showed him some things. He now started apologizing. I said, no, I don't want to be at a level where somebody cannot give me feedback. And who said an entry-level officer cannot give a CEO a feedback that can be transformational for the... So, but don't stop providing the feedback, even when you know it's going to rebuff it. Even when you know it's going to be like water falling on the feathers of a duck, that it will shake it off. But it's documented that it was provided with the feedback. Sometimes our job is not to create a change. Our job is to ensure that we provided information. The leader must be willing to change. All right. I hope that was somewhat. Victoria, you have the final floor. So anything you do, you are going to share the grace, please. After.
Thank you. I just wanted to provide some level of recommendation to the lady that talked about her being informally asked to manage someone who is older.
Okay,
there's something
that's OG.
I really wanted to point out for her. That older person that you think doesn't have a drive might have gotten there by virtue of how the system has treated them over time. And for the organization to not be officially coming out to say, this person now reporting to you, they are doing it indirectly. I want you to be very wary and not fall into a trap where you eventually now, start reaching out to the person as a boss versus there was no formal communication to that person that you're that person's boss. And then you will never be able to truly know who this person is. So my recommendation is this. I would advise that you work with that person as a peer and work with that person as a peer, as someone who is ready to work with this person on their journey. Anything you observe about their job that you think you can support them with it wholeheartedly, objectively, without any bias, irrespective of what you have heard about that person. Because you knowing that person objectively will also help you to understand the person's struggle and how they got to that point after how many years of working in that company, to a point where they say, you know what, if you tell me to turn left, I turn left. You tell me to turn right, I turn right. Don't fall into that trap. I also believe you will learn a lot of first lessons. One thing I tell people, if you get into any organization, the first person you should go and look for is the oldest employee. How has that person survived? Because there are so many little nitty-gritty things that you might not know that person will be able to tell you. So work with that person objectively, understand that person's struggle, help them through that struggle, and eventually, if that person now gets the official communication of, oh, you will report into this lady, they will probably not even be restricted. They won't have any bias towards you because you have been that person that has been supportive and been non-judgmental to them all along. So they will happily report into you. But if you don't use this approach, if you are not careful, you might not last long in that role. So please apply a lot of wisdom, be objective, remove all bias, irrespective of what anybody has told you. Just take it off. Work with that person, understand the struggle. It will also help you to understand where that person's shoe is paining them. And you could be the person that will help them to solve whatever problem that they have. And you find out that that person might even be the best thing that happened to you in this company. So please, just be objective with that person, work with them open-heartedly. And I believe that, you enjoy your time with them. That's all. Thank you.
And we hope that with these few words of Victoria, you are convinced and not confused. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much It has been fun doing this tonight. I enjoyed myself. I feel refreshed, actually. I feel stronger than when I started this session. Thank you so much. Cheers. Good night. See you very soon.
Thank you very much, sir, and good night.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good night. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you
Thank you
very
so
much.
much, everyone.
Thank you, sir. God bless you.
Thank you, sir.